Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And it is unfortunate that we're having to rise and speak on Bill C234 once again. But before I get into the meat of the speech that I want to bring up today, I do want to say some thank yous, and I want to thank the member for Huron-Bruce for bringing this private member's bill forward. And also the member from Northumberland, Peterborough South, who brought this bill forward in the previous Parliament, which shows you how much work we've put in to this legislation. I'd also like to thank those senators in the Red Chamber who, made the right decision. They made a decision that was based on fact, not fiction. And I know there was a lot of intimidation and bullying that was going on in the Senate as the Prime Minister and the Environment Minister were personally phoning senators to support these amendments to this very important bill. But about 40 senators stuck strong that represented their regions and represented the facts of this discussion and this debate. And I think that's really what this all comes down to today, Mr. Speaker, is we try to get these amendments removed and get the bill back into its original form and back to the Senate. This is a discussion about fact and fiction. Clearly what the Liberals are trying to say, and my comments today are going to be to my colleagues in the Bloc, my colleagues in the NDP and the Green Party, who have strongly and staunchly supported this legislation all the way through. And they've done so because they understand the importance of agriculture. They understand the importance of economic viability of Canadian farm families and the critical role they play in not only feeding the world but feeding Canadians and ensuring that we have affordable, nutritious food grown right here in Canada to support Canadian families and Canadian consumers. But unfortunately, we have a Liberal government that is making decisions based on ideology and fiction.
That's right.
The Environment Minister was very clear that if there was another carve-out in the carbon tax, that he would resign as Environment Minister.
Hear, hear.
So that the whole fallacy of the carbon tax being an untouchable part of their climate change policy, we now know to be not true. They've already done a carbon tax carve-out for home heating oil that's focused basically in Atlantic Canada. But when it comes to a piece of legislation that's supported by every opposition party in this House, and even a handful of Liberals, they're not willing to listen. It's picking and choosing, winners and losers, when it comes to who gets a break from the carbon tax and who has to pay it. Now here's a fact. By passing 234 and offering an exemption on the carbon tax to propane and natural gas, this will save farmers close to $1 billion by 2030. That's $1 billion that farmers are now having to pay the Liberal government when they're already paying record-breaking input costs on feed, fuel, fertilizer, and many other inputs. But what we found out earlier last week is that not only is that $1 billion being taken out of the pockets of farmers by the Liberal government, the GST is being charged on top of the carbon tax. Now, we've all known that. We've been putting private members' bills forward. Alex, sorry, Mr. Speaker, I can't say that. My Conservative colleague has put a private member's bill to remove the GST from the carbon tax, but we now know the numbers, and the numbers are staggering. The GST just on the carbon tax cost Canadians almost $500 million last year. Wow. By 2030, it will be $1 billion. Cumulatively, over these past several years, and by 2030, Canadians will have paid $6 billion in the GST, just on the carbon tax, not on every other goods and service that they're using. It's no wonder that Canadians can't afford to put food on the table, put fuel in their car, pay their mortgage, and certainly it's no wonder that farmers are struggling every single day, and they are looking to these types of pieces of legislation that are going to offer them some financial relief.
Exactly.
Now, the Liberals are also saying, here's the next fiction, that there are commercially available alternatives to propane and natural gas on farm, especially for when it comes to heating and cooling barns. We know that's not true. Electric heat pumps are not going to heat a 100,000 square foot chicken barn that is built at the state-of-the-art technology. They should be applauding Canadian farmers for what they are already doing. Here's another fact. The average global emissions that come from agriculture are about 26%. In Canada, the emissions that come from agriculture are 8%.
Wow, there we go.
That is a stat that we should be applauding every single day, that it shows what our farmers are doing to ensure that they are the strongest environmental stewards of their land, soil, and water. But instead of being a champion for Canadian agriculture and applauding what farmers are doing, the Liberals are punishing them with a carbon tax and defending it every step of the way. There are no other commercially viable options. There's no way to change behavior for farmers that need natural gas and propane to heat their barns and to grow their food in greenhouses. During the recess, we had 3 or 4 days in southern Alberta. It was minus 37. I guarantee you a heat pump was not operating and not sufficient to ensure the health and safety of cattle, of pork, of poultry in those operations. But in those minus 37, those farm families are still out there making sure that we have quality, affordable food to eat every single day. Here's another fact. The amendments that we're discussing here today that were passed by the Senate were already proposed by the Liberals in the House of Commons at the Agriculture Committee. And those amendments were voted down by the elected members of that committee. We've gone through this discussion. But again, fiction. This isn't about viable options for the Liberals. This is about trying to kill a bill that would provide a carbon tax carve-out for farmers. Another fact, Professor Sylvain Charlebois, Dalhousie University, in his food report study said policies like the carbon tax on farmers are going to increase the wholesale cost of food by 34%. 34%, Mr. Speaker. Again, these are costs that are being put onto farmers. They're back on the farmers. But down the road, it impacts Canadian consumers who are struggling to put food on the table every single day, when we have 2 million Canadians accessing the food bank in a single month. Unbelievable that's happening in a country like Canada. Mr. Speaker, this is a discussion about fact and fiction. And I want to thank my members of the opposition parties who have stood by facts. They have stood by Canadian agriculture and the importance that we grow affordable, nutritious food here in Canada. And hopefully they will continue to stand with us on 234 while the Liberals focus on fiction. Hear, hear.